3.2 Compound Statements. In this section, we're going to learn how to take simple statements, convert them into some type of symbolic form so that we can interpret them. Let's take a look at this table. Statements of symbolic logic. Now, we learned about negation on the previous section, and we have what is called a tilde in front of that letter P. What that means is not P, or we can also say it is not true that P. Remember, P represents a simple statement. The next one we have is called a conjunction. The conjunction uses what I call a rooftop or an upside down V, and it stands for the word and. And if you remember from chapter 2, and means intersection. So the P with the rooftop Q means P and Q, or we can also state it as P but Q. All right, the next logic symbol is disjunction, which is P with a V, Q. And we say this as P or Q. Next, we have a conditional statement. It has a P with an arrow that points towards the letter Q. This means if P, comma, then Q. It also means P is sufficient for Q. Or lastly, Q is necessary for P. All three of these statements represent the conditional logic. And lastly, we have the biconditional. The biconditional has double arrows and Q. This means P if and only if Q. So the double arrows can imply if and only if. P is necessary and sufficient for Q. So it's a good idea to go ahead and review this table. Make sure you understand your different logic symbols. Statements formed by combining two or more simple statements are called compound statements. All right, so let's look at this exercise. And it says, let P and Q represent the following simple statements. P represents it is after 5 p.m. and Q represents they are working. Right? Our problem says for us to write each compound statement below in symbolic form. So let's take a look at the first one, part A. Part A says it is after 5 p.m., which is going to give us my P. Then we have the word and the word and is my rooftop. And lastly, it says they are working, and that is my Q. So our compound statement is P and Q in symbolic form. For part B, it says it is after 5 p.m. and they are not working. So the items we need to be careful of on here is making sure we have the correct symbols that represent simple statements, and make sure that we use the correct symbol for and for not. So in this case here, I have P and not Q. P and not Q represents it is after 5 p.m. and they are not working. So this is how we translate compound statements into symbolic form. The letter P represents David amuses Juliet, and Q represents Juliet amuses David. Write the symbolic statement Q and not P in words. Let me rewrite that a little bigger here. Q and not P. So let's write this into words. Q is Juliet amuses David. Then we have rooftop, which is a conjunction meaning and. And then we have the tilde with the P, meaning not P. So since P represents David amuses Juliet, the not would be David does not amuse Juliet. All right. From there, we would probably just reread it one more time. Juliet amuses David is Q, and means the conjunction. David does not amuse Juliet. That is not P. Now we just need to find the correct option that matches, and it looks like it would be option B. So what we're learning here is to go from simple statements to symbols and back and forth from symbols back to statements and compound statements. Let P and Q represent the following simple statements. P is, this is an orange. Q, this is a fruit. Write the following compound statement in symbolic form. So we can see that we have, this is not an orange, which is the opposite of P. And it says, it's not a fruit. And once you see this word if, what you should consider doing is rewriting this. Think of your if-then statement or conditional. If it's not a fruit, and you can think of a comma here if you'd like, this is not an orange. Now, the original statement is not written incorrectly. It is correct to write it that way without the comma. But what you need to do is be able to identify on your own that you have a conditional here. In this case here, it says if it's not a fruit. So we know that we're looking at the Q statement about it being a fruit. But this word not is telling us that we have not Q. All right, because we have the if, we have what's called a conditional. And then what follows is, this is not an orange. And again, we have not an orange would make this not P. All right, since P is this is an orange, not P is this is not an orange. So this was a little tricky one. You have to read your statement carefully, identify your P and your Q, and when you notice that you see the word not, go ahead and make that the negation of those letters. And then look a little bit harder and further to see if you see the word if and only if this, then that occurs. That'll tell you you have a conditional or biconditional. So be very careful with these, but this is your symbolic statement. Inclusive or means P or Q or both. P or Q or both. Let's look at our exercise. Let P or Q represent the following simple statements. P, the bill receives majority approval. Q, the bill becomes a law. Write each compound statement below in symbolic form. So looking at part A, the bill receives majority approval. This statement matches exactly with P. Then we have the word or. This is your disjunction, which we write as a V. Following the word or, it states the bill becomes a law, which is exactly Q. So this compound statement turns into P or Q. All right, so let's take a look at part B. Part B says, the bill receives majority approval. Once again, that is my P. I have the word or, which is my disjunction. And then I have the bill does not become a law. That word not should speak volumes to you because we need to take the negation. So this would be not Q. So this compound statement becomes P or not Q. Let us see if we can figure out this next problem. Let P, Q, and R represent the following simple statements. P, the taxes are high. Q, it is snowing outside. R, the chair is broken. Write the following compound statement in its symbolic form. The taxes are high and it is snowing outside, or the chair is broken. So we need to be careful here. There is a comma that tells you that you have a little hesitation. So let's deal with everything in front of the comma first. It says the taxes are high and it is snowing outside. So taxes are high represents P and is a conjunction. It is snowing outside represents Q. Then we have our comma. We have the word or. So what you want to do here, since you have a comma, it is basically grouping everything in front of the comma together. So what we need to do is go ahead and place our parentheses to group together this conjunction. Then we're going to place our or and grab our final statement. The chair is broken, which is R. All right, so the comma breaks up the statement, and because it does so, that is why we put what's in front of it inside parentheses. So we have P and Q or R. If-then statements. If-then statements are basically your conditionals. If you remember, we had the one with the arrow, and we had P up front, and we have Q. This is called a conditional. And what occurs in front of the arrow, the P, that is called your antecedent. What follows afterwards, the Q, is the consequent. So let's take a look at this. Write each compound statement below in symbolic form. So looking at A. If a person is a father, then that person is a male. So before we can understand how to convert this into symbolic form, we need to define our simple statements. So what we can do is we can say P going to be a person is a father. And then we'll take a look at our Q. And we can state for Q that the person is a male. The person or a person. Those would be our two simple statements. So for part A, it says, if a person is a father. So notice in this case here, we have an if and we have then. And there's also a comma right here. So that is considered a conditional statement. That means we're going to be using that arrow. So if a person is a father, if P, then, there's my conditional, that person is a male would be Q. So we say if P, then Q. Taking a look at part B. If a person is a male, that would be Q this time. Then that person is a father. So this time I have Q, if Q, then P. And for part C, it says if a person is not a male. So that would be not Q. If not Q, then that person is not a father. So we have the negation of P. So these are conditional statements. Once again, the first thing you want to do is if you get something like this, go ahead and define your simple statements, your P and your Q first. Then go ahead and break apart each statement to understand whether you have P or Q first or a negation, and understand that you are working with a conditional. If, then. If this occurs, then that will happen. P represents the temperature is above 70 degrees. Q, we finished writing. R, we go to the beach. Write the symbolic statement in words. So they're giving us the symbolic statement. And let me rewrite that. That is R with the rooftop, parentheses, P, arrow, Q, close parentheses. And we're going to rewrite this into words. So R represents we go to the beach. All right. And then we have and for our rooftop, but I noticed that what follows that is in parentheses. The P, arrow, Q is all in parentheses. So it's telling me there's some separation, so there should be a comma right here, followed by the word and. And then we have the inside of the parentheses, which is a conditional, because this is an arrow right here. Let me see if I can change that up just a little bit. So the arrow means that if P occurs, then Q. So we have and if the temperature is above 70 degrees, so if the temperature is above 70 degrees, then Q occurs. And Q is we go to the, we have finished writing. So once again, we place the comma because there's a separation with the set of parentheses. And then we have our conditional that follows after the word and. So this right here is my rooftop, which is the word and. So the final answer that we will choose will be A. This matches the statement that we wrote below. One of the ways that you can reassure yourself that you chose the right answer is to look at the other options. If you look at B, it says if we go to the beach and the temperature is 70 degrees, and then there's a comma right here on this one, that's telling you that you're going to put your set of parentheses in front of the comma, which wouldn't make sense and it would not match our original statement. Part C says if we go to the beach, then. So their if-then statement or conditional starts at the beginning, and we did not start with a conditional. So we did choose the right answer in choosing A. If and only if statements. If and only if statements are considered biconditional, and that is when we have the double arrows. P double arrow Q, biconditional. So if and only if. So let's take a look at our statements. Our simple statements are P, the word is set. Q, the word has 464 meanings. And we are now going to rewrite each one of those statements into symbolic form. So looking at A, it says the word is set. So we know that matches P. If and only if, that's my double arrows. The word has 464 meanings, and that is my Q. So I have P, double arrow, Q. The next statement, the word does not have 464 meanings if and only if the word is not set. Goodness, we have some negations going here. So the word does have 464 meanings is Q, but it has the word not in front of it, so it's going to be not Q. If and only if is double arrows. The word is set is P, but we have the word is not set, so this is not P. And these are the symbolic forms for both of these statements. So remember, if and only if means we're working with a biconditional statement. So we are going to take the following statement and convert it into symbolic form. It says, let P represent the simple statement, I like people. So this is my P. Q is I have the time. And R is I miss the party. So let's take our statement. It says, I miss the party if and only if it's not true that both I like the people and I have the time. Goodness, that's a very long, wordy statement, but we can do this. All right, it says, I miss the party. Go ahead and change colors here. I miss the party is going to be R. If and only if, that's my biconditional. And it says, it's not true that both. So when you are applying to more than one, in this case, both, you want to place your parentheses. It is not true that both. So far what I do have is I have R with my biconditional. I hope we can agree on that part. And then it says, it's not true. So that's a negation, that both. So here's what you have, the negation, it is not true that both. So something is occurring inside parentheses, and we're going to fill that in now. It says, I like the people, and conjunction, I have the time. I like the people will be P. We have a conjunction, rooftop. I have the time, Q. All right, so let me see if I can decipher this. So this means if and only if. And this symbol means the not. In this case, it's not both. And this is my and. So the tricky part in here was if it is not true that both, where you have to put those parentheses around. So we'll take a look and see which one this matches. And it looks like it matches my D as in Delta right here. All right, so be very careful. Just read through carefully. Go ahead and place in your letters that represent your symbol statements, and then go for your symbolic form of conjunction, disjunction, conditional, biconditional. If a symbolic statement appears without parentheses, statements before and after the most dominant connective should be grouped. All right, so they're telling you about what has the most dominance on here, and dominance of the connectives. So then we have number one here, there's a negation, and that says that is the least dominant. And then we have the same level of dominance as conjunction and disjunction. And then we have the conditional. We're just gradually getting to the most dominant, and the biconditional is the most dominant. So it says on here, statements before and after the most dominant connective should be grouped. When they're speaking of grouped, that is usually placing parentheses or even brackets on there. So something like this, let me just make one up. I'll say R, arrow, Q, or P. So if you have this statement and they want you to go ahead and show the dominance of these, the one that has the most dominance is going to be this conditional. It is more dominant than the disjunction. All right, because if you look at our chart here, it says the least dominant is a negation. The next least dominant would be conjunction and disjunction, and then the next higher dominance would be the conditional, and then the biconditional. So in this case here, since the conditional is more dominant, let me write this down. We're going to place a grouping symbol around everything else. When it says it should be grouped, well, we'll group that together like that. And this would be the answer for this one. So we have a problem to practice on the next slide. Use grouping symbols to clarify the meaning of the symbolic statement. So let me rewrite this. I have R with a conditional, Q and P. Then I have a biconditional, and then I have R and P. All right, so try to remember the order of what had the most dominant versus what had the least dominance. And right now we know that the most dominant we had is going to be our biconditional. So what we have to do in this case, and I'm going to go ahead out front here and you say group together what's in front of it and group together what's behind it. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this one more time, and there's a reason for this madness. Let me go ahead and write this out. Same statement. When we look at the first set of parentheses, notice that we have a conditional. Right on the first set of parentheses, I have another conditional. And my conditional is right here. I'm going to highlight that a little differently. So again, if I'm looking inside the first set of parentheses, there is another order of dominance. And that would be this conditional. So that means what's after the conditional needs to be grouped together. All right. Normally we don't use double sets of parentheses. So in that case here, I would put these in parentheses. But since I know it's also included above the or in front of the biconditional, I'm going to place brackets. What's in front of the biconditional versus what's after. And what's after can still stay or remain in parentheses. All right, so that last one would be the correct interpretation of inserting the dominance grouping. I just made up this problem so that we could practice one more time on inserting our grouping symbols to show order of dominance. And before we get started on this, I just want you to take a look from left to right, and let's pick out what is dominant and label them. So the most dominant symbol or connective that we have on here is the biconditional. So this is number one that I will place, most dominant. And then the next most dominant would be the conditional. I have two conditionals. So this would be number two, and this is also number two. They're equal, but they're the next level of dominance. And it looks like I have also a number three right here. The next level of dominance on the connectives would be conjunction or disjunction. And then lastly, I have my negation over here. All right, so hopefully that'll help you figure out how to break apart your items. So when I have the number one dominance, I'm going to separate out what's in front of the biconditional versus what's after the conditional. All right, and then what's in front of the biconditional, once I place those in parentheses, there's nothing further to do. It'll just say if P, then Q. But what's following the biconditional, notice that I have another conditional, so I'd have to group together the P or Q, perhaps in parentheses, so that I could finish that out. So let me rewrite this one more time. My final statement, what it would look like would be parentheses, P, arrow, Q, close parentheses, double arrow. Then I would put a bracket, parentheses, P or Q, close parentheses, arrow, negation of P, close with a bracket. And this would be the final statement with the grouping symbols inserted.